Have you ever made a just incredibly minor mistake? Like maybe you tripped on a slightly uneven sidewalk or you misspoke during a quiet moment in a meeting.
Oh, yeah, the worst.
Right, and suddenly it feels like this blinding hot spotlight just swings directly onto you, broadcasting your error to the entire world.
Yes.
You can literally feel your face flushing with, the heat rising in your neck, and you are absolutely certain that every single person in the room is staring at you, just judging you in that exact moment.
I mean, the physical reaction is so intense, it almost feels, well, it feels completely disproportionate.
Yeah.
Your heart races, your palms sweat, your stomach drops. It feels like a literal life or death situation, even when you've just, say, spilled a single drop of coffee on your shirt. And honestly, no one is even looking.
Exactly. So today we are tearing down the walls between the self and society to figure out why that happens. We're setting out to understand this intricate, sometimes just exhausting relationship we have with the judgment of others.
It is exhausting.
It really is. And we're pulling from a huge array of research for this deep dive. Everything from clinical therapy reports on social anxiety to cross-cultural studies to some really fresh psychological data out of Africa.
Right, because we want to figure out how our brains are wired to care so deeply about what strangers think.
Right, and why this wiring sometimes just misfires to cause extreme anxiety, and ultimately how we can turn that blinding spotlight off to achieve, true psychological well-being. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, the journey to understanding why we fear the crowd always has to start by looking backward. I mean, before we can deconstruct social anxiety, we have to look at our primal evolutionary drive for connection.
Which is pretty deep-rooted.
Oh, incredibly. That drive doesn't start in middle school or, in the boardroom. It starts the literal moment we are born.
Right, because an infant is they're entirely vulnerable.
Exactly. A human baby can't do anything for itself. So if it doesn't establish an immediate, desperate connection with someone who will protect it, it simply won't survive.
Wow, yeah, when you put it like that, it's literally life or death from day one.
It is. And psychologists John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth built the entire framework of attachment theory around this very reality.
Right, attachment theory.
Yeah, so they observed that the initial emotional bond between an infant and their primary caregiver, it essentially becomes the blueprint for the human mind.
Okay.
An infant needs a caregiver to act as a safe haven when they're distressed and a secure base from which they can, confidently explore the world.
So it's like if a toddler is playing in a park and looks back to see their parent watching them, they feel brave enough to wander a few feet further to investigate a new toy.
Exactly. They have that secure base.
Because they know someone is watching their back.
Right. And you can actually see this play out in real time. Ainsworth ran an experiment called the strange situation. She basically observed how babies reacted when their mothers briefly left them in a room with a stranger and then returned.
Oh, I think I've heard of this. It's fascinating.
It really is. When caregivers are consistently responsive, the child develops a secure attachment. But if the care is inconsistent or cold, the child develops anxious or avoidant attachments.
Right, which carries over into adulthood, right?
Exactly. Bowlby argued that these early experiences form what he called internal working models. So the relationship you have with your earliest caregiver becomes the foundational template you use to judge all future relationships.
Wow.
Yeah, your expectations and even your baseline self-worth for the rest of your life.
So if our literal survival depends on being connected to a caregiver early on, and then, connected to a tribe later in life, do our brains have some kind of internal alarm system to warn us if we're about to be kicked out of the group?
Actually, yes. Psychologist Mark Leary proposed exactly that mechanism in 1999, and it fundamentally shifted how we think about self-esteem. He called it Sociometer Theory.
Sociometer theory. Okay, what is that?
Well, we usually think of self-esteem as self-love, right? We treat it like an evaluation of how much you like yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I feel good about myself today.
Right, but Leary argued that self-esteem is not about you evaluating yourself at all.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's actually an internal, unconscious monitor, a sociometer, that is constantly scanning the room to gauge your social acceptance.
Oh, wow.
It's measuring your relational value to others.
So it's measuring how much other people value having you around. I like to think of it like the fuel gauge on a car's dashboard.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. Like when you look at the gauge, it feels like it's measuring the car itself. Like the car is saying, I feel empty or I feel full. But the gauge is actually measuring an external resource, the gasoline, that the car desperately needs to keep moving forward.
Yes.
In the human experience, that external fuel is social acceptance.
That is a perfect analogy. And what's fascinating here is that, historically, for early humans, social exclusion didn't just mean eating lunch alone at the cafeteria.
Right. It meant you were cast out of the tribe.
Cast out into the wilderness. It meant starvation or being eaten by predators. Social rejection was literally a death sentence.
So our brains treat it like a death sentence today.
Exactly. Our sociometer evolved to trigger intense, painful negative emotions. What we experience today as a sudden drop in self-esteem or a wave of depression.
Right, whenever it detects a drop in our social status.
It is a primal alarm bell screaming, "Fix your social bonds or you will not survive."
Which perfectly explains why getting a weird, unreadable look from your boss can completely ruin your entire weekend.
Totally.
Our brains are basically treating a minor social ambiguity like a saber-toothed tiger attack. But wait, here is where I get a little stuck.
Okay, what's that?
If we are naturally social creatures who need to read the room to survive, isn't it weird that we are so spectacularly bad at guessing what others are actually noticing about us? I mean, if the sociometer is so crucial, you'd think it would be a highly accurate instrument.
You would think so, but the research points out that it's actually incredibly hypersensitive,
Oh, okay.
which leads us to wildly misjudge reality. Researchers Gilovich, Medvec, and Savitsky coined a term for this, the spotlight effect.
Ah, the spotlight effect.
Right. It's our cognitive bias
Yeah.
to drastically overestimate how much other people are noticing our actions and our appearance.
Because we are the center of our own universe, we naturally assume we are the center of everyone else's universe, too.
Precisely.
To illustrate just how powerful this delusion is, we have to talk about the SCAR experiment conducted by Kleck and Strenta. I mean, it is one of the most mind-blowing studies on human self-consciousness I've ever seen.
Oh, it's absolutely brilliant.
So volunteers were brought into a lab and told they were going to interact with a stranger to study how physical deformities impact social interactions. First, a professional makeup artist applied a fake, highly realistic, and just very prominent ugly scar to the volunteer's face.
Right. And the volunteer was handed a mirror to examine the scar, really locking in the visual of this glaring flaw.
Exactly. They see it, they know it's there. Then, the makeup artist casually mentions they need to apply a little translucent moisturizer to keep the theatrical makeup from cracking under the lights.
But the moisturizer was a trick.
Such a good trick. As the artist applied it, they were actually using a solvent to secretly wipe the fake scar completely off.
So sneaky.
The volunteer walked into the room to have a conversation, totally unaware that their face was perfectly normal, entirely blemish-free.
And the results of those conversations are stunning. Afterward, the volunteers reported that the strangers were acting tense, distant, and patronizing.
Even though there was no scar.
Exactly. They claimed the strangers were aggressively avoiding eye contact, or, conversely, staring uncomfortably at their cheek.
Oh my God.
They attributed all of this negative social feedback to the scar, a scar that did not exist.
So the volunteers were basically projecting their own intense self-consciousness onto the other person.
Yes, their internal sociometer was screaming that they were physically flawed and socially vulnerable, so their brains literally hallucinated an entire negative social reality to match that internal feeling.
That is just wild.
And Gilovich's research adds another layer to this with the embarrassing T-shirt studies.
Oh, right. The Barry Manilow shirt.
Yeah. They found that if you are forced to wear a deeply uncool T-shirt into a crowded room, the spotlight effect is massive if the exposure is immediate. You think everyone is staring at you.
But if you sit in a hallway for a while first?
If you wait for like 15 minutes, the effect decreases. You get used to the shirt yourself, so you assume others care less. Furthermore, in group settings, we completely fail to realize that the audience's attention is constantly divided among dozens of stimuli.
Right. Everyone else is just thinking about their own weird T-shirts.
Exactly.
This plays out in the modern workplace constantly. It ties directly into the imposter phenomenon.
Oh, heavily.
That persistent, nagging feeling that you are an intellectual fraud and everyone around you is just moments away from figuring it out. The research shows that feeling like an imposter severely amplifies the paralyzing fear that your coworkers are constantly evaluating you.
Yes, the fear of negative evaluation.
But again, why are we so bad at guessing what others notice?
It basically comes down to two overlapping cognitive biases: the anchoring and adjustment bias and the illusion of transparency.
Okay, unpack that.
When you feel anxious or like an imposter, your internal emotional state is incredibly loud to you. It's deafening.
Right, you can't ignore it.
You use that loud internal feeling as your psychological anchor. You try to rationally adjust your perception to account for the fact that other people can't feel your racing heart, but you insufficiently adjust.
So you stay anchored to your own anxiety.
Exactly. You remain so anchored to your own inner monologue that you suffer from an illusion of transparency. You falsely believe your internal terror is just leaking out of your pores for everyone to see.
Wow. So we are walking around desperate for connection, terrified of rejection, and constantly overestimating how much people are judging us.
That's the human condition.
But the way we experience all of this isn't universal, is it? Because here's where it gets really interesting. The cultural water we swim in fundamentally changes how this social wiring operates from the ground up.
Oh, absolutely. Social psychologist Geert Hofstede famously defined culture as the software of the mind.
The software of the mind, I like that.
It is the collective mental programming that guides our daily interactions and shapes our perception of reality. And one of the most significant variations in this global software is the dimension of individualism versus collectivism.
Right, so individualistic cultures, which are prominent in the West, like the US, the UK, Australia, they prioritize the needs and goals of the individual over the group.
Exactly.
Your identity is defined by your personal traits and achievements. But collectivist cultures, found widely across Asia, Africa, and parts of South America, value the group over the individual. Your identity is deeply intertwined with your family or community or your company.
And this distinction goes far beyond just social habits. It literally changes how the brain processes visual and social information.
Really? Like visually?
Yes. The research highlights that individualists are trained from birth to use analytic thinking. They look at isolated attributes.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, if someone acts out in public, an individualist's brain immediately attributes that behavior to internal factors, thinking that person has a bad temper.
Ah, okay.
Collectivists, on the other hand, are trained to use holistic thinking. In a collectivist society, your survival depends on group harmony, so your brain is trained to constantly scan the entire relational context.
Right, they see the big picture.
A collectivist might see the same outburst and think, that person is acting out because of the incredibly stressful environment they are currently in.
So it's like the individualist brain acts like a laser pointer, focusing only on the isolated subject, while the collectivist brain acts like a floodlight, illuminating the whole room.
That's exactly it.
The sources even mention a study where Japanese participants recalled significantly more background objects in a scene compared to American participants, who mostly just remembered the main focal point.
It's amazing. This cultural software changes everything, even how we cope with stress.
Right, the coping styles study.
Yes, a fascinating study comparing Anglo-Australian students with Asian international students found that the individualistic Anglo-Australians used coping styles focused on personal action and rigid planning to relieve their stress.
Very like, I'm going to fix this myself.
Exactly. While the collectivist Asian students leaned heavily on social support networks and religious beliefs to weather the storm.
That makes total sense.
Even career choices are driven by different engines. Individualists are told to follow their personal passion. Collectivists often factor in family expectations.
And interestingly, when their jobs align with those family expectations, their job satisfaction actually goes up.
Because it fits their cultural software.
Right. And the concept of power is totally flipped, too. In individualistic cultures, power is often associated with uniqueness, independence, and the ability to violate social norms without facing consequences.
Think of the Silicon Valley CEO wearing a hoodie to a formal board meeting.
Yes. But in collectivist cultures, power is conceptualized through warmth, friendliness, and a strict, respectful adherence to social norms. But the research points out an interesting economic link here.
Right, the transition.
As societies become more affluent, urban, and technologically advanced, they naturally transition from collectivism toward individualism, meaning moving toward greater economic wealth might actually disconnect us from the safety net of collectivist social support.
Which is a huge trade-off. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, even our core emotional experiences are dictated by this programming.
How so?
In Western individualistic societies, people are encouraged to lean toward feeling personal pride and prefer high-energy, positive emotions.
Like excitement.
Exactly. But in collectivist societies, the emotion of guilt is much more common. not necessarily in a toxic way, but because guilt is a relational emotion.
It signals that you've let someone down.
Right, which helps motivate you to repair relationships and maintain group harmony. They also tend to prefer calm, low-energy emotional states.
So, whether your brain is programmed to seek personal pride or group harmony, what happens when that software completely crashes?
Oh, it can get very dark.
What happens when your primal sociometer gets stuck in the red zone, and the spotlight effect becomes so paralyzing that you literally can't function?
Well, let's look at the clinical case report of a 14-year-old boy we'll call Patient A.
Right.
Patient A was diagnosed with severe social anxiety disorder. His background set the stage. He came from a working-class family with highly demanding parents and very little emotional communication.
So his secure base was already kind of shaky.
Very shaky, and the inciting incident, the moment his software crashed, happened in his school dormitory. He simply forgot to take out the garbage, and his dorm leader severely verbally abused him, berating him until he was in tears in front of all his peers.
Oh man, talk about a sociometer instantly dropping to absolute zero. He felt entirely ostracized from his daily survival group.
And his reaction was intense, crippling avoidance. He developed physical symptoms, racing heart, profuse sweating, chest tightness, anytime he was even near his dorm mates.
It got to the point where he couldn't concentrate in class for fear of being ridiculed.
His avoidance became so extreme he would constantly flee the school grounds to run home. Home became his ultimate safety signal.
Okay, so how did they treat him? The therapist used a cognitive behavioral framework, right?
Yes, CBT, which involves helping the patient understand their own negative cycle of thoughts and behaviors. The core of his treatment was cognitive restructuring, challenging his deeply irrational beliefs that everyone hated him, and gradual exposure therapy.
Right, exposure therapy.
Exposure therapy is essentially forcing the brain to gather new, accurate data about reality. They created a hierarchy of fears, starting with just chatting with classmates, and slowly worked up to facing the dorm leader.
But what is really notable in this case report is the behavioral reinforcement they used. They agreed on utilizing a physical grounding technique for his avoidance behaviors. Specifically, if he engaged in avoidance or tried to flee, he had to immerse his hand in freezing cold water.
Which sounds intense.
Yeah. Is putting a hand in ice water a standard psychological intervention? It sounds incredibly intense. Why wouldn't they just talk him down?
It does sound harsh, but it acts as an immediate visceral circuit breaker. A panic attack traps you entirely in your own head. The shocking physical sensation of cold water forces your brain abruptly into present-moment awareness.
Oh, I see.
It breaks the panic loop.
Ooh.
The goal of exposure therapy isn't to make the patient feel perfectly calm right away.
Right, it's to prove that they won't die.
Exactly. It is to prove to the patient that the social disaster they fear won't actually happen, and more importantly, that they can survive the discomfort.
So it's about shifting away from relying on safety signals, like running home.
Because fleeing actually reinforces the anxiety long-term. Your brain learns that the only reason you survived is because you ran away.
Wow. Now, our sources also introduce acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, as an alternative or complementary approach to this. And ACT takes a fundamentally different angle.
Very different.
Instead of trying to change or argue with the negative thoughts like in traditional CBT, ACT is about changing your relationship to those thoughts.
Yes. One of the core dimensions of ACT is called cognitive diffusion. If patient A has the thought, I am a complete failure, cognitive diffusion teaches him to view that not as a fundamental, unchangeable truth, but simply as a string of words his brain happened to produce.
He learns to say, I'm noticing that I am having the thought that I am a failure.
Exactly.
Pause on that. Cognitive diffusion. So if my brain says I'm a failure, ACT just wants me to say, that's a nice thought, brain, and move on. That sounds a little, passive.
It sounds passive, sure, but it's actually incredibly active psychological work. You aren't ignoring the thought, and you certainly are agreeing with it. You are stripping its power by changing how you interact with it.
It's almost like looking at a terrifying monster through a pair of binoculars, feeling your heart race, and then slowly lowering the binoculars so you realize it's just a guy in a cheap rubber suit standing 50 feet away.
Yes.
The thought is still there in the room with you, but you realize you are the one observing it, not the one being attacked by it.
That is a perfect analogy. The other major pillar of ACT is acceptance. This means intentionally making room for difficult emotions without trying to escape them or fight them off. You stop treating anxiety like an enemy invader.
You let the anxiety sit in the passenger seat while you keep your hands on the steering wheel. You don't pull the car over just because anxiety is riding shotgun.
Exactly. The psychological shift is moving from avoidance to committed action.
Committed action.
The goal of ACT isn't to magically stop feeling anxious. The goal is to act according to your deep personal values while you are feeling anxious. You take out the garbage, even while your heart is pounding.
Which brings us to the ultimate goal of all of this.
Yeah.
Whether you are using cognitive therapy to restructure your thoughts or ACT to accept them, the end game isn't just to stop having panic attacks in a dorm room or feeling like an imposter in a boardroom.
No, the objective is to achieve a state of genuine psychological liberation.
And according to a fascinating study focused on educational environments in Accra, Ghana, and Johannesburg, South Africa, the name for that state of liberation is authenticity.
Authenticity. The researchers utilize Carl Rogers' psychological framework for this.
Okay, what is his framework?
He defines authenticity simply as minimizing the gap between the real self, who you actually are behind closed doors, and the ideal self, the persona you feel you should be projecting to the world.
They also tied this to self-determination theory, right?
Yes. This theory argues that for a human being to thrive, we need three basic psychological needs met.
Autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
Exactly. We need autonomy, meaning we feel in control of our own choices. We need competence, feeling capable and effective at what we do. And we need relatedness, a sense of genuine connection to others.
When those three needs are met, authenticity blossoms. And the statistics they found in this study are just staggering.
They really are.
In their study of 250 adults, authenticity predicted a massive 42% of the variance in self-esteem.
Furthermore, when they combined authenticity with self-esteem and relationship quality, it predicted nearly 39 to 60+% of the variance in overall mental well-being across different metrics. Those are incredibly robust numbers for any kind of psychological research.
It proves that authenticity isn't just a corporate buzzword.
Not at all. It's a profound, measurable protective factor against anxiety and depression. When the researchers conducted qualitative interviews, the participants used vivid language to describe this state.
They described dropping their inauthentic personas as shedding heavy armor.
Heavy armor. Just think about that.
I mean, think about your own life for a second. Think about how much energy you spend every single day performing your ideal self at work, crafting the perfect email, or curating your life on social media.
It takes so much energy.
The participants in the study talked about the massive relief of freeing themselves from the exhausting weight of seeking external validation.
This data is telling us that the performance itself is the exact thing draining your mental health.
So what does this all mean? It means authenticity is the ultimate shield against the spotlight effect.
Exactly.
The spotlight effect relies entirely on you being terrified that people will see your flaws. But if you have minimized the gap between your real self and your ideal self, if you fully accept who you are, then you simply don't care if the spotlight is on you.
When you stop performing, you stop caring if the audience is watching.
Boom!
But this raises an important question, especially in the context of the cultural differences we discussed earlier.
Right, because culture changes everything.
In collectivist cultures, purely individualistic, unyielding authenticity can cause real friction. You can't just be radically, selfishly yourself if it deeply disrespects your community or disrupts group harmony.
So they introduced the concept of relational authenticity, meaning how do you remain genuine and true to your internal values without burning bridges and destroying the social fabric of your community?
It is a delicate balancing act.
It is the ultimate tightrope walk of the human experience, integrating your primal need to belong to the tribe with your psychological need to be true to yourself.
It requires high emotional intelligence to navigate, but mastering that balance is what leads to that massive variance in mental well-being.
We have covered incredible ground today.
We really have.
Let's quickly recap the journey. We started with Bowlby and Ainsworth, learning how early childhood attachment builds our foundational blueprints for relationships.
And we learned from Mark Leary that our self-esteem is essentially a hypersensitive fuel gauge, a sociometer constantly scanning for social rejection to keep us alive.
We explored how that hypersensitivity causes the spotlight effect, making us hallucinate judgment that isn't actually there, like the fake scar.
Right. And we looked at how cultural software, the analytic laser pointer of individualism versus the holistic floodlight of collectivism, shapes how our brains process that social reality.
We saw how therapies can recalibrate a malfunctioning sociometer through exposure, ice water grounding, and cognitive diffusion.
And finally, we discovered that shedding the heavy armor of performance to achieve relational authenticity is the key to durable well-being.
So the next time you trip on the sidewalk or mispronounce a word in a meeting, and you feel the glaring, burning heat of that spotlight swinging onto you, remember the scar experiment.
Yes, remember the volunteers.
Remember them walking into a room, feeling intensely judged for a hideous physical flaw that had already been wiped away. The spotlight, the judgment, and the tension are almost entirely in your own head.
It is a projection of your own ancient survival wiring. The threat isn't real. You are safe.
But I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to chew on before we go.
Okay, let's hear it.
If Mark Leary is right, and our self-esteem is essentially a fuel gauge measuring our social acceptance, what happens to our foundational sense of self when our society becomes an algorithm on a glowing screen?
Oh, wow.
If your primal sociometer is being hijacked, calibrated to measure anonymous likes and views instead of real face-to-face human connection, are we outsourcing our very self-esteem to a machine?
I mean, when the sociometer is hooked up to an endless, unsealing feed, the fuel gauge can never truly register as full.
We want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the mind. Until next time, keep exploring.